on This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
And our guests for the rest of the show, FSCJ sociology professor Dr. J.R. Woodward and political science professor Dr. Daniel Cronrath. So thanks for being. Here's the big deal. They're sharing with people what the 6 amendments on the Florida ballots are and what they mean. So we're going to go through that together today. This is also something that you guys are doing together coming up, I guess, next Wednesday or this coming Wednesday at noon, right?
Right. Next Wednesday, October 14th, we're going to be having a live event at noon, fscj.edu/events. So anybody who wants to come in, learn a little bit more, perhaps ask Dr. Woodward or I a question, it's open to the public. Please just log on to the website and join us.
Yeah, and so I heard about this. I said, our viewers on This Week in Jacksonville should know about this first. So we're going to go one by one through these amendments, and we're going to start with Amendment 1. This is a citizenship requirement to vote in Florida elections. The ballot description says, this amendment provides that only U.S. citizens who are at least 18 years of age, a permanent resident of Florida, and registered to vote as provided by law shall be qualified to vote in a Florida election. Dr. Cronrath, why don't you start here?
Well, my opinion of this is, this is a very, very popular citizen initiative. If you look at Dr. Bender's poll, which just came out recently, 78% of Floridians seem to already agree with this. I think my biggest issue with this is that this is already the law in Florida. We already have elections in which only citizens of the state and citizens of the United States can participate in that election. So a lot of people have said that this is actually a solution in search of a problem relative to whether it's actually going to solve.
Yeah, your input, sir.
Right, yeah, I agree. It's the language, if a constitution tells you who can vote, then it kind of by definition tells you who can't vote. So we already have the language in there that you have to be a citizen, but this is a number of different states now have this initiative. The group who sponsored this originally, the man is I think a former Missouri senator, and he's trying to get this on a number of places around the country.
Why is this important for those people who say we need this amendment to the Constitution?
I think from their perspective, is they're trying to clarify the language to make it more solid, to say only versus every. To me, it's not a significant difference. It's more of a semantic difference, but I think they're just trying to clarify the language. They also might be trying to bring people to the polls to vote as well. It's, again, as Daniel said, it's a very popular amendment, but I don't see that at best maybe it's kind of superfluous. At worst maybe it's xenophobic, but yeah, it just has kind of
it's a good point to make. I mean, critics would make that this is going to appeal to somebody who would be somebody who's a little bit more nationalist in their political views. Somebody who, relative to participation by illegal immigrants in an election, that this is something which is actually going to tighten it. Right now in the state of Florida, it is in fact the law that you can't participate in an election at the local, state, or federal level if you are not a citizen.
Yeah. So as you put it, solution in search of a problem, I think is what you said there. So let's look at Amendment 2 here. This one, the definition, or at least the description on the ballot, it's about raising Florida's minimum wage. It raises the minimum wage to $10 per hour effective September 30th, 2021. And then each September 30th thereafter, minimum wage increases by $1 an hour until the minimum wage gets to $15 an hour. That would be in 2026. What's the impact of doing something like that?
Well, the people that support this will call it a living wage. So right now, the minimum wage in Florida, if you work full time, it's not very easy to support yourself, nonetheless a family. So the potential positive impact is that it provides a living wage, and so it's graduated over time. So it's not supposed to be a huge impact right now. Felt very strongly. The people opposed to it, I've heard maybe from, I think it's the restaurant and hospitality industry. A couple are concerned that they would have to cut workers or cut hours or things like that. But the net overall impact down the road might provide workers with more purchasing power, and then they could then spend it in the economy.
Is this good policy? Is this a good way to do it, or should it just be legislation through the House and Senate?
Well, I think that's who you ask is going to determine whether or not it's good policy. I think one of the other attributes of this particular amendment is that there's going to be a cost to bear by state and local government. A lot of our folks, for example, who work here in the city of Jacksonville will start at a wage which is less than $15 an hour. If you're a public works, somebody who works for the Department of Public Works doing road maintenance, if you're somebody who works for the Parks Department cleaning our city parks, or if you're an entry-level position in our library system, yes, this will give you a raise. It's going to give you a raise which is going to be a taxpayer-paid-for raise. So as you actually, as this goes out year after year after year, there will be an additional tax burden, which is going to have to be met by the people. Now, what is the trade-off with that versus the economic stimulus created by giving Floridians a living wage? We know folks who are at the bottom of our wage scale, they typically aren't savers, they're spenders. So there will definitely be an economic stimulus impact to this kind of legislation. Will it be one that Floridians can afford? Will it be one that small businesses and mom and pop shops can afford? Obviously a large corporation, somebody here locally, a McDonald's or somebody along these lines, clearly has billions of dollars in revenue every year that they can find a way to pay for this. Will your local small chain, will your local burger shop? And those are legitimate concerns relative to those folks who operate small businesses.
Yeah. Let's talk about Amendment 3 here. This is all voters vote in a primary election in the state for state legislature, governor, and cabinet. And this is regardless of political party affiliation. All candidates for an office, including party-nominated candidates, appear on the same primary ballot. Two highest vote getters advance. If only two candidates qualify, no primaries held. Winner is determined in the general election, and this would be effective January 1st, 2024. This is something that a lot of people have talked about because we see write-in candidates close the primaries just to particular parties, but we don't know that this is going to have enough support, right?
Well, right now it's going off at about 57%.
And has to be 60%.
Has to be 60%. Yeah, we amended the Florida Constitution to increase the threshold to 60%. This is actually an amendment that myself and a lot of other political scientists like, because if you look at the 3.7 million Floridians right now who do not belong to a political party, they're either independents or they're registered NPA, which is no party affiliation. They currently can't participate in the primary process. So what this would do is it would create a statewide top two primary, very similar to how we elect our mayor and our sheriff and other constitutional offices here in Jacksonville. Okay, the top two vote getters in that primary with every candidate listed would then advance to the general election.
Yeah. Do you see how this would play out for folks? Would this empower more people to be involved in the process?
Right. That's a great question, and I wish I knew the answer. I just talked to Daniel about this when we got here. I wish we had a crystal ball, because the arguments for it is that it does get a lot more people to be able to be involved in this electoral process, but at the same time, there's a concern that it could have a negative impact on minority office holders, that the vote would be split too diluted, in other words, and so in minority districts or in Democratic districts, you might end up having only Republicans on the ballot, and you might end up having only Democrats on the ballot somewhere else. So there's a concern, and the research on this is nascent. So there's a concern that it could have a difficult impacts on minorities and some third parties.
Yeah. As a matter of social science, there isn't a lot of data out there to know which way it's going to go. The only thing anecdotally we can say locally is that we use this system here in Duval County, and it did not prevent us from electing our first African-American sheriff in Nat Glover or our first African-American mayor in Alvin Brown. Mm-hmm. So at least locally, we do have some anecdotal experience with this not disenfranchising African-American or people of color at the polls.
Yeah. Well, so we are about halfway home on our discussion of the amendments, so stay with us. The final three that you'll see on the ballot is coming up after a short break. It's next on This Week in Jacksonville.